African Esquire from the Federation of African Liberation, a Pan-Africanist group and Black nationalist group that seeks to help African people all over the world achieve ultimate liberation. And I'm here to talk to you today about our first campaign, and that is the campaign to boycott France. And the reason why we are calling for African people who believe in our liberation to boycott France is because of the policies they have been carrying out inside of their former colonies, and most notably what has been happening in Togo. If you do not know, Togo is going through really a revolution. The people are pushing back against a corrupt dictatorship, and the France government has been certainly and completely supporting that dictatorship, and we will want to see that come to an end. Before I get into that, I do want to make an appeal directly to people who are we might identify ourselves as African American, people who might identify themselves as Jamaican or as Haitian or different types of Caribbean, any of us who are here by way of the transatlantic slave trade. I want to make an appeal directly to you to take this very seriously. The reason why is whenever you look at the countries that the slave trade happened in, or the regions where the people were taken from, I'm going to read off some of the regions for you right now. So we had the country of Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, the Ivory Coast, Ghana, Benin, Togo, Nigeria, Gabon, Cameroon, Niger, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Angola, Mozambique, and Madagascar. Now, if you do not know, almost all of these countries are Francophone countries, meaning countries that were formerly colonized by France. With the exception of Ghana and Liberia, Senegal, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Togo, all of those were colonies of France. So when we're saying that we are calling for this to help the people in these countries that were colonies of France achieve liberation from France and their policies that they're doing in those countries, these are our direct relatives. Understand, we descend from these people. More than likely, in fact, definitely, you have some type of trace in your blood that you can directly link to these Francophone countries. So if you can directly link yourself to them, you should be able to understand that this is something that should be close to you. It should be near and dear to you. In the same way that you might feel a certain way when you hear about something happening in your city, in your town, in your country, you have to understand that these are people who are directly related to us. And the brutality that they're going through, it could have easily been us. You know, had our ancestors not gotten caught by the slave traders, it could be us, the ones who need for others to speak on our behalves in order for us to achieve liberation. So I'm saying all of us who are members of the transatlantic slave trade, here by way of this transatlantic slave trade, understand that this directly affects us, and that this is not something that is all over on the other side of the world, but something that should be near and dear to us also. So I want to talk briefly about what is going on in Togo. So I want to briefly talk about the history of Togo, and I've been learning about this by watching different videos, reading different articles, and just learning about the history of what happened in Togo and how did Togo get to be where it is right now. Now I'm going to briefly try to go through the history of Togo, and this is not all-encompassing. I encourage everyone to do their own research, but this is just a quick brief summation of the problems there and what is going on today. Now, Togo, of course, as I said, was previously a French colony. However, they achieved their independence on April 27th of 1960. When they achieved their independence, they elected Salvanius Olympio, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering names, but, you know, I'm trying to get through this. He was the first president of Togo. However, Olympio was basically not going to be a French puppet, in that he wanted Togo not to be completely dependent on France. One of the ways that he wanted to distance Togo from being so dependent on France was he wanted to create Togo's own currency instead of Togo using the colonial CFA franc. Now, this is a franc that is a French franc and essentially gives the French the power over the currency in that country, but he wanted for Togo to have its own currency. Well, the French didn't take this very well, and as a lot of Western powers have done in Africa since these countries have achieved independence, since they didn't like it, they basically sponsored a military coup. And on January 13th, 1963, Olympio was assassinated in a coup that was supported and sponsored by the French. Now, the replacement that the French government put in Togo was Ganasingbe Eyadema, and he basically was a puppet of France. He was willing to allow the French to pursue their interest in Togo, which is why they supported his regime being the regime of Togo. He was incredibly oppressive and not in the interest of the people there. However, he maintained power until 2005 when his son took power, and his son is Far Gasingbe, who took power in 2005, as I said. And he, too, was very pro-France, and he was willing to allow the French to maintain their interest in that region. Now, the government in Togo that has been sponsored by France has been incredibly brutal to the people. The people have been living in horrible conditions. There is an activist in Togo, Farida Naborma, who you could follow her and get a lot of good updates on the conditions that the people are living through in Togo. But basically, it's very inhumane. People are getting beat down by the police. People are getting punished for protesting, and all the while the French government has been the one supporting these people, not only supporting them, but they are the ones providing the military and monetary support to the regime in order to oppress the uprising in Togo. However, this has not quenched the uprising. The uprising is still very much going on. Now, that is basically a brief overview of what's going on in Togo. However, what we also must keep in mind with France is that they're not only supporting these corrupt regimes. France is acting as a colonist still in these countries, although these countries are supposed to be independent. And I'm going to go through a number of ways that France has been doing so, but I want to emphasize, we talk about neocolonialism. Colonialism supposedly ended back in the 1960s. Colonialism was when the Western powers were directly treating these African countries like it was their country. It was their satellite country. We could do what we want with you. We could tell you what to do. We control you. You basically are beholden to us. That is what is colonialism, and neocolonialism is when you have the countries allowing these countries to be independent supposedly, but they're going behind the backs of the people and talking directly to the leaders and saying, hey, you need to let us do this in your country, take this from y'all, do this with y'all. If you do not, then we will possibly create a coup, or we will not support you monetarily, or we will give you money if you do what we tell you to do. That is what neocolonialism is. What I'm about to read about the things that France has been doing in the former African colonies of France, it's not even just neocolonialism, it's straight colonialism. It is straight, unabashed colonialism that they're telling the countries to do a number of things that you would never dream of. And as I go through these, I want us to keep in mind that France pretends to be such a fighter for human rights. It pretends to be one of these loving countries that is so humane to the world. They like to point their finger at the United States, which is, its own monster, certainly. But they like to pretend to be the holier than thou one. But all the while, they are the most repressive regime as far as what they do inside of formerly colonized countries. So as I go through these, keep in mind the image of France that we have of a fighter of human rights and as a country that is supposed to be for all humanity and not just for their personal interests. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what we call the colonial tax. Yes, it's true. France requires the countries that used to be colonized by France to pay them taxes in order for them to keep being independent. Now, you would think it would be the opposite. The common sense thing would be that if you colonize this country, you set them back how many years, you killed this many people, you took their resources, and you never paid them back. Common sense would say that maybe you owe them reparations. You certainly owe them reparations. However, the French government has not only not given them reparations, but they have forced these countries to pay them taxes, and they're still taking that money. So I'm reading from an article. It's from Global Research, the Center for Research on Globalization. This was published on September 25th of 2016. Now, in regards to the colonial tax, this is what they are saying. This outrageous tax deprives African economies of much-needed funds, exacerbates debt, and strips their autonomy over their natural resources. But the detriments are more than just economic, as the ills of colonialism manifest in social ways that are equally devastating to the dignity and identity of the African people. It then goes a little bit into the history of Togo that I was just mentioning. Salvanius Olympio, the first president of the Republic of Togo, instead of signing the Colonization Continuation Pact with de Gaulle, instead agreed to pay an annual debt to France for the so-called benefits of French colonization. And what that means by that is France is basically saying, you got so many benefits from being our colony that if you want to be free, you have to pay us taxes. Now, it goes on to say this prevented the French from not destroying the country before they left. However, the amount estimated by France was so big that the reimbursement of the so-called colonial tax was close to 40% of the country's budget in 1963. Olympio's dream was to build an independent and self-sufficient, self-reliant country, but France had him killed by a sergeant who was given $612 bounty by the French embassy. History has shown that despite years of African fighting to liberate themselves, France repeatedly used many ex-foreign legionnaires to carry out coups against elected presidents. This included Jean Bedel Bokassa, who assassinated David Dacko, the first president of the Central African Republic. In the last 50 years, a total of 67 coups have occurred in 26 African countries, of which 16 are ex-French colonies. This indicates that France is desperate to hold on to whatever land that it has in Africa. And this is actually a quote from the former president of France that he made in March of 2008 about Africa. He said, "Without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power." And that Chirac's predecessor, François Mitterrand, already prophesied in 1957 that without Africa, France will have no history in the 21st century. So let's be very clear. This is not, it's very clear that France views Africa as a necessity, and they are doing whatever they can to keep this, and they're going to fight to the death to keep it, because frankly this is their livelihood. This is their only way that they can survive and going into the 21st century living the way that they have been living, because we know that the lifestyle in France is very lavish, and if they want to maintain that, then they're going to have to keep exploiting African countries. Now, going on in the article, it says, as of January 2014, 14 African countries are obliged by France through a colonial pact, get this, to put 85% of their foreign reserve into France's central bank under French Minister of Finance control. They are effectively putting $500 billion every year into the French treasury. African leaders who refuse are killed or victim of coups. Those who obey are supported and rewarded by France with lavish lifestyles while their people endure extreme poverty and desperation. France has been holding the national reserves of 14 countries since 1961. And those are Benin, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, Mali, Niger, Senegal, Togo, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Congo, Brazzaville, and Equatorial Guinea and Gabon. Despite the two main African banks having African names, they have no monetary policies of their own. In fact, get this, French allows them only 15% of their money in any given year. And if they need more money, then they can borrow an extra money from their 65% from the French treasury at commercial rates. So get this. It's their money. They put it into the central bank, and France essentially controls the money 85%. If they want more money back, they can borrow from their own money from France. Crazy. The pact also included a clause that Africa had an obligation to make French the official language of the country and the language for education, and an obligation to use France colonial money, the FCFA. Also, they were obliged to send France an annual balance and reserve report. If they refused to send it, they would not be entitled to any money. Now, that article went through a number of the things that France has been doing inside of former colonies, and these are, I don't want to just call them former colonies, these are sovereign nations, sovereign African nations that were formerly colonized by France. Here's a number of other things. Some of them I've mentioned, but I'm just going to go through a list so that you can get the full picture of what France has been doing to our people in these West African countries. So, this comes from AfroLegends.com, and I'm just going to read off the list. You can, again, do more research, delve into these things whenever you have time. So, of course, number one, the colonial debt for the benefits of French colonization. Number two, automatic confiscation of national reserves. So the African countries should deposit their national monetary reserves into the French central bank. The right of first refusal on any raw or natural resource discovered in the country. So France has the first right to buy any natural resource found in the land of its ex-colonies. It is only after France says, I'm not interested, that the African countries are allowed to seek other partners. Number four, priority to French interest in companies in public procurement and public bidding, and the award of government contracts. French companies must be considered first, and only after these countries were considered could the African country look elsewhere. Number five, they have the exclusive right to supply military equipment and train the country military officers. And obviously, them wanting that, there's a clear reason. They want to make sure that they control the military, because if these countries are able to control their own military, then it's unlikely that they're going to be so, it's unlikely that the people are going to be so repressed whenever they come and combat French imperialism. Number six, the right for France to pre-deploy troops and intervene militarily in the country to defend its interests, meaning such as situations as Togo, the people are revolting. They're saying, we no longer want this government. This is not a democracy. We want our own government that represents us. France sends their military supplies, or France sends military support, and they're able to quell the opposition in order to maintain their dominance in that country. Number seven, the obligation to make French the official language of the country and a language for education. Number eight, the obligation to use France colonial money, FCFA. France is not ready to move from the colonial system, which puts about $500 billion from Africa into its personal treasury. Number nine, the obligation to send France to send to France annual balance and reserve reports. And if they do not send these reports to France, again, then they can't withdraw their own money from the French banks. Number 10, renunciation to enter into military alliance with any other country unless authorized by France. So these countries have to go to France in order to get authorization to partner with another country for any type of military action. And number 11, the obligation to ally with France in a situation of a global war crisis. There is something, and this is a comment that I love what they said. They said there is something almost psychopathic in the relation of France and Africa. And it's very true. In order for us African people and people who are descended from these same regions to sit by and allow this to continue, we have to be out of our minds. Dr. Amos Wilson said, for the things happening in this world, in order for them to be doing things to us, colonizing us, enslaving us, doing so many things, and for us to not have a reaction, we literally, absolutely are required to be out of our minds. And so I agree, this is very psychopathic. Person also says, France is severely addicted to looting and exploitation of Africa since the time of slavery. And it's up to us Africans to free ourselves without asking for permission. And that is essentially what the FAL is Federation of African Liberation is seeking to do. Now, how can you help? The FAL, we are calling for a boycott of French products. The reason why, let me explain the boycott, is if you want to fight this type of economic exploitation, you have to meet it with economic warfare. And so calling for a boycott of these products is not only a way to get the attention of the French and who their economy is, heavily reliant on these things, But also to get answers. You know, if you're such a human rights advocate as a country, then how could you allow this to keep happening? How could you support these regimes? How could you be doing these things? So we are calling for, again, a boycott of all French products. Now, I'm going to name some. And if you can do more research and find more that you might buy, that's fine. This common products that I was able to identify, you know, are most likely to be used by a lot of consumers. Now, there's L'Oreal, so all L'Oreal products. Carol's Daughters for us African women. That is a natural hairline. No, they're not Black owned. They were sold to a French owned company. Essie, Lacombe, Giorgio Armani, that's for us who have expensive taste. Ralph Lauren, Urban Decay, L'Oreal Paris, Garnier, Maybelline, NYX Cosmetics, Soft Sheen Carson. This is again another it's exclusively Black brand. Dark and Lovely. Some of us might buy their relaxers. Gentle Treatment, Magic Shave, Ultra Sheen, Essie, Cartier, Chanel, Christian Dior, Yves Saint Laurent, Louis Vuitton, and Dannon or Yoplait if you eat those types of yogurts or dairy products. Now, we are asking again for you to boycott until the situation changes. Understanding that this is not just a simple thing. This is not just a go about your day type of thing. This is a life or death thing. Our people are dying in the conditions that they are living in inside of these countries that France has colonized and continues to colonize. Or people are dying from starvation, and they're dying from physical violence, actual violence from these regimes that are repressing them, expressing their freedom. So understand and take it in. If you love L'Oreal products, understand that this government that benefits from your purchase are literally killing your people. And if you're here about a transatlantic slave trade, that doesn't make them any less of your people, because these are the people that we descend directly from. Understand that they are exploiting your people, and understand that this is a life or death situation. So we're asking for a serious boycott, not a temporary one, not one until this fades from your memory, but this to be a moral issue to you. How could you support something that is actively trying to kill you? And it's for everyone in the African diaspora. All of Africa is colonized, if you don't know. And even if it's not as blatant as what is going on from former French colonies, if Somalia, South Africa, every single country, Zimbabwe, they have some type of thing going on where you have these Western countries purposely seeking to get access to the resources, because Africa is the richest country on earth minerally. So understanding this is something that affects all of us. And so that's why we're asking you to take the boycott and take it seriously, and to actually carry out and not just do this casually. Now, we are asking you to do this by also signing a pledge, because I think it's actually more motivating when you make a pledge. And so we have a petition that will be inside of the description box. We ask that you sign that petition, and we're also asking that if you are in an organization or you are a leader of an organization, that you unite with the FAL on this matter. One of the things that we really believe in is building a united front. That means that it's not just one organization calling for it. We got 10, 20, 30 organizations calling for the same thing. And that's how we really get things done inside of this world. So if you're an organization, we're asking that you also sponsor this boycott. If you want to message us, we will actually put your name in the petition so that it's clear that you are not just someone that's, hey, I signed it, but you're saying, hey, we back this up and we're going to advocate this. And this is our issue, like it's all of our issues. So, number 3, if you're not in an organization and you are African, I'm asking you to please get an organization. It is absolutely necessary that all of us be inside of some type of organization that's fighting for the liberation of our people. And if you are in that organization, I'm also asking that you try to talk to the people in our organization about supporting this initiative officially. Not just individuals saying, okay, I'll boycott, but the organization actually taking a stance that, okay, we're actually going to do this to help not just the people in Togo, but in all the former colonies of France, to help those people to have a voice. And we have a voice so that they can have a voice. So remember that also. And also, I would say if you're interested in joining the Federation of African Liberation, please join our Facebook group, Federation of African Liberation Supporters. We have a questionnaire to fill out. We're trying to build a movement and eventually move into becoming an official organization. But right now, we are focusing more so on our campaigns and getting support behind those campaigns. And so please go in and fill out that questionnaire if you would like to join our movement. That is all I have for you today. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope that you will join in this initiative by boycotting France.